sound the alarm, he's actually posting a video. Alright, what's up, y'all? I'm Jasper, and I'm going to be your professional goblin for the evening, and I'm sorry that I've been procrastinating on my JSA Oban Part 2 video, but there's some pretty good reason for that. And first one is I am stretching myself pretty thin with the infinity side of my life right now. I have at least 7 bat reps currently in the chamber to edit and post, and this is going to be one of my intros to a series because earlier this year, about a month ago at time of posting, I went to Adepticon, and that was a 50-man, 5-round satellite, and spoiler alert, I ended up placing ninth overall out of 50, and I intended to do a shorter overview of my bat reps for there, less in depth than the ones that I have posted previous because I can't just like stop what I'm doing. I'm in the middle of a tournament, of course. But the other thing delaying Oban is I have been hard at work workshopping vanilla JSA because I see so many people asking, why do I take this faction over leaning one way with Oban or Shinden Butai? And just getting my ADHD hyperfocus on vanilla has pulled me away from Oban, unfortunately. So that is the other part of the delay. But anyway, I'm going to go over my lists and the mission pack for the tournament in this video, just as a intro to either making this a 3-part or a 6-part series, based on whether or not I want to do this as a day 1, day 2, or a round 1 through 5 kind of scenario. And this overarching introduction will prevent me from having to like re-record it for individuals or day to day. So yeah, shrug. First things first, let's get this out of the way. The mission pack that I was facing, day 1 consisted of unmasking, capture and protect, firefight. Day 2, supplies and decap. And the way that I looked at it, I found the most overlap in firefight and decap because there's a specific idea that I like to pull off with the vanilla JSA and Oban for those two missions. Whereas unmasking, capture, protect, and supplies all kind of had the same theme of me wanting to walk both to the midfield and even push past it to interact with objectives that are in front of my opponent's deployment zone or even in the deployment zone. So I basically built my lists around the missions and less so around my opponents. I've got some new thoughts on that I will address as I go over the individual list. There are very obvious tweaks that I would want to make if I ran through this tournament pack again, both with my like trooper choice and with my grouping. So anyway, let's get into it. All right, so this was my list 1. And as you can see, I intended to bring this to capture and protect, supplies, and unmasking. And the major idea here is that I brought the what I identify as the strongest 2 trooper combo in vanilla JSA, and one of the reasons that I think the vanilla JSA justifies itself over Oban and Shinden Butai, and that is the powerhouse units from both those factions in the same list. I'm talking the Hatamoto and the Shikami. Between the two of them, with the Hatamoto's massive order efficiency with Lieutenant +1, just running him as a solo piece, and the Shikami's incredible movement, which during Adepticon we were still playing with an 8-8 movement Shikami. However, now that his super jump has been reined in a little bit, I still think that him running as a 9-2 or a 9-inch super jump plus 4-inch dodge is still ridiculously stupid mobility. And it really just means that you're going to be second skill eclipse grenading more often than not. But shrug, Basically, we've got a red Oni and a blue Oni that are able to effectively play whack-a-mole on the opponent, get to whatever objective that you want to, push forward, be difficult to push into, etc., etc. These guys are powerhouses, and anything further, I am repeating myself. So, next thing I want to look at is my sort of defensive options. Now, I am a notoriously cagey player. I deploy like a scared turtle, like every time I've faced someone on TTS, now that I've got my desktop working, I have always drawn a comment of, I did not expect someone to play JSA this patiently, this reserved, And I think that we summarize this best with Siege's comment, jumping into my game against Bolt. I spectated your game with Bolt for 45 seconds and heard him say, "Ugh, give me something to shoot at," when you mentioned a cautious move, and it affirmed everything I have assumed about him. I don't know if I'll keep that in, but shrug. But anyway, the defensive soup stock. We've got two Ryukins and a Garen HMG TR bot. Now, I do have some thoughts about this. One, I think it's a bit of a defensive overcommitment for general purpose play. This probably does not suit most people's play styles. And two, I found that a lot of tables don't actually have good spots to put two Ryukins and their decoys and a Garen and ancillary ARO pieces like a Kyojin killer in my deployment zone acting as a fake mine, and a flashbot and a warcore that are staring down some lanes to provide, the generic flash pulse AROs. I was running out of physical space to put the two models for the second Ryukin. So a change I would make in the future with this ARO base for my playstyle is I would try to find two extra points in this list, cut one of the Ryukin, and run a Ryukin Raiden Garen setup. And the only asterisk I would add to that discussion is that that puts a Kuriyami, a Raiden, and a Taishin as possible off the board orders. So one of these two hackers needs to go, just to give myself the extra order on table to do stuff with, because three hidden deployments is not it. And now, as I mentioned, the Kyojin killer, this is a flex offense and defense piece. If I'm going first, then I can just shove him straight forward and use him as a homing missile on whatever grouped up units the opponent has. However, if I'm going second and I set up my ARO base with my two Ryukins and their two mines, I can just put the Kyojin killer in a spot around them that looks like another mine. I had multiple occasions where the Kyojin killer revealed as a Flamen Spear and caught my opponents just completely off guard. And it's that flexibility that makes this Kyojin killer basically a must pick in vanilla JSA for me. That dude is an all-star in Shinden Butai, and he is an all-star here. Now, moving on to my second must pick, we are looking at the combination of both the Tenko Deactivator Disco Baller and the obligatory Pangling Baggage Bot. If you can deploy these two guys, relatively close together, then you have the Tenko serving as a backfield with just a few orders, double shot in two directions, impetuous, shoot my disco balls, reload, shoot some more. You can very easily cover the entire board. Every single fire lane will be completely shut down so long as that Tanko and that baggage bot are alive. So I like to play super reserved with them. I made a joke in the Whip 12 episode that may or may not be out at this time, where my Tanko does not leave my bed chambers unless I am in a most dire emergency. Just the massive value that he represents being that reloadable disco ball line of fire coverage, like, the dude is insane. And on top of that, he's also a Blitzen light shotgun, two wound heavy infantry. Like, limited cover sucks, sure, but he's just enough of a meat bag that he's difficult to physically push into. Now, let's talk about some of my mission tech pieces. First off, the Taishin Killer Hacker, at the time being a 6'6 super jumper, now moving down to a 6'4. This guy's still a combat jump parachutist. He's really, really good, really fast, and can get to places on the board where you really need him to be. And he is a killer hacker, which is usually a vital defensive tool. Well, defense and offense. They can't kill you if they're dead, a tool for JSA. And then I follow that up with the Kuriyami Ninja, who, as an infiltrating hidden deployment hacker, like, sure, unmasking has the exclusion zone, and that sucks. But with capture and protect and supplies, being halfway up the table just because, and being uninteractable with hidden deployment makes him a really strong turn 3 game changer. or he can just, deploy right on the supply box and try to grab it immediately in the event that, I go first or the opponent leaves that specific box untouched. And yeah, shrug. Now, moving on to my weird tech. I'm sure some of you have been eyeballing this. So as I was filling out the list, I realized that with the Hatamoto Lieutenant providing +1 SWIC on a Spitfire, instead of costing a SWIC, which is crazy, I was just swimming in extra support weapons cost, and I figured that a 16-point regular order to fill out the list with the missile bot was actually an okay inclusion. And that's for two reasons. One, I have the Kurayami Ninja, and one of the missions is unmasking. In the event where my opponent is completely holed up, and in the event that the terrain on the table supports all of their HVTs being completely uninteractable, fully behind corners, where I basically have to walk through the opponent's deployment zone to interact with them, I figured that I could just have my ninja use his hacker bonus to push the buttons, spotlight an HVT, guided missile it. Move push button, spotlight HVT, guided missile, lather, rinse, repeat. And to that effect, on top of that, I decided to also bring the Keisotsu regular hacker, because between the Keisotsu regular hacker, Kurayami Ninja, and the Uran guided missile bot, I was also looking at capture and protect. I'll just leave my Keisotsu hacker sitting right next to the beacon, and if I get a turn, then he can also throw out crazy koalas in front of it. But yeah, basically, I'll have two regular hackers that can double up on it. So if you get to the point where you do grab my beacon, cool, you're gonna get spotlit and GML'd for trying to you dare to grab it. So yeah, the guided missile felt like a really strong option for both capture and protect and unmasking. And then it's just generally okay in supplies if I can try to make that active turn hacking work. And speaking of supplies, we get to my last tech choice for the mission pack. At first, I was running an engineer, and I really feel like that's what you should run 90% of the time because given the fact that all these heavy infantry are 2 wounds and typically, mimetism, or they're just, they're generically chunky, you kind of want to have the engineer to be able to fix them in case the opponent breaks out the classic, Oblivion Carbonite combo and turns them off. So basically, I had to dedicate a command token to speedball every game so that I can get the switch on option if I needed it. The Tokusetsu Doctor is specifically for supplies because I figured, why not have a 2 dice specialist that can potentially do the mission? Now, change I would definitely make in this list. If the Hatamoto is unable to interact, if the Tenko does not need to throw down disco balls, then realistically, this group 2 does nothing. A change that I have made with my vanilla JSA list going forward with a group and list that looks like this is I take this Kyojin killer, I move it down, I swap it with this Workhor. And this harder to swap means that I will have something to do with 3 vectors in my group 2 and leave additional orders for my hackers and Shikami to just do the mission. Because the Workhor is also a dedicated, token his irregular piece and give more orders into the Shikami. Hopefully you've played this game once, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, that was my thought process on list 1. Now moving on to list 2. And here's where I think I fucked up a little bit. I think that list 2 is not fundamentally doing much different than list 1. I've dropped the Hatamoto for an Oni Waban lieutenant, and that's because if I'm playing Firefight Decap, this guy's completely uninteractable. And in a world where the deployments, the table allows me to be greedy, I can potentially push him up and do Oni Waban things. He is an elite troop, and Firefight has 3 classified cards, so being a lieutenant, CC dude, and elite troop, he does 7-ish cards or whatever. But basically, The Oniwaban Lieutenant serves as a I will never give the opponent 3 points of kill lieutenant. That is a hefty price to pay for it, but overall, I think it's worth. And going back here, this is what I identify as the problem. I think that if you have the Tanko and baggage bot, you have enough stupid vision control that JSA now no longer needs to build toward the missions. I can build toward the opponent. And between these two lists, this ARO base being exactly identical does not diversify my defensive capabilities against armies that can deal with the Ryukin and Garen. And because of that, now I'm really looking into and because of that, now I'm really looking into like a Karakuri styled list too, where my ARO threats and, the stuff that my opponent has to interact with is no longer hiding behind MIM 6. It's hiding behind 1 million structure, try to dig through it. And specifically looking at factions like Invincible Army, Torchlight Brigade, Shazvasti if you're fearing a Guilo list, Morats, and all those factions that are able to bring a like mobile MSV shooting piece. I think that having a different ARO platform to work with is preferable. So yeah, shrug. Um, so with firefight and decap, I know that I want to avoid taking specialists as much as you can for firefight, which is why I feel like the Shikami is a necessary evil for being a specialist. If the Shikami dies, then you've got way bigger problems. The Kurigami Ninja is hidden deployment. He doesn't have to come out until I want him to. And he's just super high value for doing all of the cards because he's got the D charges and he's a hacker. And then he's also got good defensive setup with both the viral mine and he's a competent CC martial arts user with his DACC weapon. You'll notice I've kept the standard Kyojin killer, the Penguin and Tanko combo. To get more card coverage, I feel like the second necessary evil is to have either an engineer or a doctor. I brought the armed turret engineer because it was not nerfed at this point. And with the engineer, the Ruishi's MSV1, and all of my other elites, veterans, whatever, I believe I have about 18 cards covered, and that's probably good enough. Now, the interesting tech piece that I busted out here is the Sohei. Now, his profile looks kind of unappealing at first glance, but he is the cheapest veteran troop in the faction, and not only is he a veteran troop, he is a veteran medium infantry with competent CC stats. And in these missions with 16-inch deployment zones, he can be pushed up pretty effectively, corner guarding with a pulsar, grenades, and assault pistol. So he is a tertiary objective card grabber, and he's pretty effective defense from the enemy pushing in. And if they do push up, don't laugh at an assault pistol. He's got basically all the tools he needs to like actually unentrench something. And because he's only 16 points, you won't need to feel bad about throwing him into something. And he does all those cards and he's not even a specialist. Like that was a really good find for both firefight decap, I think. Now, rounding out the list, I said this in the Oban Part 1, the Aragoto boarding shotgun is a dirt cheap 13-point motorcycle that you can just shove at the enemy and probably get some damage done. But even if you don't, boarding shotgun, boarding pistol is a good corner guard. The enemy cannot just casually walk past it. They have to deal with it somehow. Now, additionally, I brought out the Robio standard flash bot, of course. I made some adjustments in the list because the other idea with Firefight and Decap is currently the War Cores are still a specialist, so I felt that they were absolutely not worth it to take in the mission. So I had to avoid it. The point just worked out such that I had to take a Keisotsu AP rifle. I guess I could have taken a Senku combi rifle for better range bands, but shrug. I think the Keisotsu has a bit more sentimental value, and he provides a regular order that has a gun that can do something and isn't a big 55 mil base from the Penguin. So yeah, like that's just why he's there. He looks backwards and guards the back edge of my deployment zone from Margot and Duroc. Now, last thing I didn't mention yet, well, barely briefly touched on it, was the Ruishi. And I'm usually not a fan of the Ruishi. I think the Luduan was a viable choice here, the Thunderbolt EM carbine piece. But what ended up selling it back to me for the Ruishi was the Mine Dispenser tech. Because, like I said, I like to turtle up, I like to play super cagey, super defensive, and the ability to just throw out some Mine Dispensers and, ask the opponent what they're doing with their life is like, that's a fun game plan to me. So, yeah, I think I might in the future. Well, first things first, I would definitely make the same swap. This Kyojin killer definitely has to go into group 2, and then something in here gets brought back up to group 1 to replace it. But I think in a future different iteration, I cut this second Ryukin or the Garen, and I spread his points around, and I would consider running one of the like Damaru Ruishi teams. That way I could get more meat on the table and perhaps not be as susceptible to, those predatory MSV, super jumpers that want to destroy you. Which, by the way, forgot to mention it, but the Extra, the vector operator, is one of the other like big primary offenders for that. So vanilla combined army is another option on the list for I would prefer to take a Karakuri list. And of course, you don't take the Karakuri list in firefight, but shrug, other option, I'm not really comfortable with it. I don't play them. I don't play them that much, but a tag list instead of having, the terrible twosome or the trio by cutting out and making room for a Shizoku in that list one. I don't know. I don't think either of these lists are strictly bad. It just feels like I brought list one and then list one with a hint of climb. And that's just not the principled way to defend against all the various types of threats and lists that the opponents can bring against you. So yeah, this should be a short little sample, and that should do it for my overview on my lists. And as mentioned before, I'm either going to post a day one overview with my rounds 1 through 3, and then a day two with my rounds 4 and 5, or I might do it in a bit more like bite-sized chunks, taking out the missions individually for their own little short videos. And if y'all have any preferences and you want to leave them below, I may or may not regard your opinions. It's still me we're talking about. So, I guess see you in August for my next upload. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. So, see ya, nerds.